The Shining Pyramid by Arthur Machen. Chapter 1. The Arrowhead Character. Haunted, you said.
Yes, haunted. Don't you remember, when I saw you 3 years ago, you told me about your place in the west, with the ancient woods hanging all about it, and the wild domed hills, and the ragged land. It has always remained a sort of enchanted picture in my mind as I sit at my desk and hear the traffic rattling in the street amidst the whirling of London. But when did you come up?
The fact is, Dyson, I have only just got out of the train. I drove to the station early this morning and caught the 10:45.
Well, I am very glad you looked in on me. How have you been getting on since the last we met? There is no Mrs. Vaughan, I suppose?
No, said Vaughan. I am still a hermit, like yourself. I have done nothing but loaf about. Vaughan had lit his pipe and sat in the elbow chair, fidgeting and glancing about him in a somewhat dazed and restless manner. Dyson had wheeled round his chair when his visitor entered, and sat with one arm fondly reclining on the desk of his bureau and touching the litter of manuscript. "And you are still engaged in the old task," said Vaughan, pointing to the pile of papers and the teeming pigeonholes.
"Yes, the vain pursuit of literature, as idle as alchemy and as entrancing. But you have come to town for some time, I suppose. What shall we do tonight?"
"Well, I rather wanted you to try a few days with me down in the west. It would do you a lot of good, I'm sure."
"You are very kind, Vaughan, but London in September is hard to leave. Doré could not have designed anything more wonderful and mystic than Oxford Street as I saw it the other evening. The sunset flaming, the blue haze transmuting the plain street into a road, far in the spiritual city.
I should like you to come down, though. You would enjoy roaming over our hills. Does this racket go on all day and all night? It quite bewilders me. I wonder how you can work through it. I am sure you would revel in the great peace of my old home among the woods." Vaughan lit his pipe again and looked anxiously at Dyson to see if his inducements had had any effect, but the man of letters shook his head, smiling, and vowed in his heart a firm allegiance to the streets.
"You cannot tempt me," he said.
"Well, you may be right. Perhaps, after all, I was wrong to speak of the peace of the country. There, when a tragedy does occur, it is like a stone thrown into a pond. The circles of disturbance keep on widening, and it seems as if the water would never be still again."
"Have you ever any tragedies where you are?"
"I can hardly say that, but I was a good deal disturbed about a month ago by something that happened. It may or may not have been a tragedy in the usual sense of the word."
"What was the occurrence?"
"Well, the fact is, a girl disappeared in a way which seems highly mysterious. Her parents, people of the name of Trevor, are well-to-do farmers, and their eldest daughter, Annie, was a sort of village beauty. She was really remarkably handsome. One afternoon she thought she would go and see her aunt, a widow who farms her own land, and as the two houses are only about 5 or 6 miles apart, she started off, telling her parents she would take the short-cut over the hills. She never got to her aunt's, and she was never seen again. That's putting it in a few words."
"What an extraordinary thing! I suppose there are no disused mines, are there, on the hills? I don't think you quite run to anything so formidable as a precipice."
"No, the path the girl took must have had no pitfalls of any description. It is just a track over wild bare hillside, far even from a by-road. One may walk for miles without meeting a soul, but it is all perfectly safe."
"And what do people say about it?"
"Oh, they talk nonsense, among themselves. You have no notion as to how superstitious English cottagers are in out-of-the-way parts like mine. They're as bad as the Irish, every whit, and even more secretive."
"But what do they say?"
"Oh, the poor girl is supposed to have gone with the fairies, or to have been taken by the fairies. Such stuff," he went on. "One would laugh if it were not for the real tragedy of the case." Dyson looked somewhat interested.
"Yes," he said, "fairies certainly strike a little curiosity on the ear these days. But what do the police say? I presume they do not accept the fairy tale hypothesis."
"No, but they seem quite at fault. What I am afraid of is that Annie Trevor must have fallen in with some scoundrels on her way. Castletown is a large seaport, you know, and some of the worst of the foreign sailors occasionally desert their ships and go on the tramp up and down the country. Not many years ago, a Spanish sailor named Garcia murdered a whole family for the sake of plunder that was not worth sixpence. They are hardly human, some of these fellows, and I am dreadfully afraid the poor girl must have come to an awful end.
But no foreign sailor was seen by anyone about the country.
No, there is certainly that, and of course country people are quick to notice anyone whose appearance and dress are a little out of the common. Still, it seems as if my theory were the only possible explanation.
There are no data to go upon,
said Dyson thoughtfully.
There was no question of a love affair, or anything of the kind, I suppose.
Oh no, not a hint of such a thing. I am sure if Annie were alive, she would have contrived to let her mother know of her safety.
No doubt, no doubt. Still, it is barely possible that she is alive and yet unable to communicate with her friends. But all this must have disturbed you a good deal.
Yes, it did. I hate a mystery, and especially a mystery which is probably the veil of horror. But frankly, Dyson, I want to make a clean breast of it. I did not come here to tell you all this.
Of course not, said Dyson, a little surprised at Fawn's uneasy manner. You came to have a chat on more cheerful topics.
No, I did not. What I have been telling you about happened a month ago, but something which seems likely to affect me more personally has taken place within the last few days, and to be quite plain, I came up to town with the idea that you might be able to help me. You recollect that curious case you spoke to me about at our last meeting, something about a spectacle maker.
Oh yes, I remember that. I know I was quite proud of my acumen at the time. Even to this day, the police have no idea why those peculiar yellow spectacles were wanted. But Fawn, you really look quite put out. I hope there is nothing serious.
No, I think I've been exaggerating, and I want you to reassure me. But what has happened is very odd.
And what has happened?
I am sure that you will laugh at me, but this is the story. You must know there is a path, a right-of-way, that goes through my land, and to be precise, close to the wall of the kitchen garden. It is not used by many people. A woodsman now and again finds it useful, and 5 or 6 children who go to school in the village pass twice a day. Well, a few days ago I was taking a walk about the place before breakfast, and I happened to stop to fill my pipe just by the large doors in the garden wall. The wood, I must tell you, comes to within a few feet of the wall, and the track I spoke of runs right in the shadow of the trees. I thought the shelter from a brisk wind that was blowing rather pleasant, and I stood there smoking with my eyes on the ground. Then something caught my attention. Just under the wall, on the short grass, a number of small flints were arranged in a pattern, something like this. And Mr. Vaughan caught out a pencil and piece of paper and dotted down a few strokes. You see here, he went on, there were, I should think, 12 little stones neatly arranged in lines and spaced at equal distances as I have shown it on the paper. They were pointed stones, and the points were very carefully directed one way.
Yes, said Dyson, without much interest. No doubt the children you have mentioned had been playing there on their way from school. Children, as you know, are very fond of making such devices with oyster shells or flints or flowers or whatever comes in their way.
So I thought. I just noticed these flints were arranged in a sort of pattern and then went on. But the next morning I was taking the same round, which, as a matter of fact, is habitual with me, and again I saw at the same spot a device in flints. This time it was really a curious pattern, something like the spokes of a wheel, all meeting at a common center, and this center formed by a device which looked like a bowl. All, you understand, done in flints.
You are right, said Dyson. That seems odd enough. Still, it is reasonable that your 6 schoolchildren are responsible for these fantasies in stone.
Well, I thought, I would set the matter at rest. The children passed the gate every evening at 5:30, and I walked by at 6 and found the device just as I had left it in the morning. The next day I was up at 6:45, and I found the whole thing had been changed. There was a pyramid outlined in flints upon the grass. The children I saw going by an hour and a half later, and they ran past the spot without glancing to right or left. In the evening I watched them going home, and this morning, when I got to the gate at 6 o'clock, there was a thing like a half-moon waiting for me.
So then, the series runs thus. Firstly, ordered lines, then the device of the spokes, and the bowl, then the pyramid, and finally, this morning, the half-moon. That is the order, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. But do you know, it had made me feel very uneasy. I suppose it seems absurd, but I can't help thinking that some kind of signaling is going on under my nose, and that sort of thing is disquieting.
But what have you to dread? You have no enemies.
No, but I have some very valuable old plate.
You are thinking of burglars, then?
Said Dyson, with an accent of considerable interest.
But you must know your neighbors. Are there any suspicious characters about?
Not that I'm aware of, but you remember what I told you of the sailors.
Can you trust your servants?
Oh, perfectly. The plate is preserved in a strong room. The butler, an old family servant, alone knows where the key is kept. There is nothing wrong there. Still, everybody is aware that I have a lot of old silver, and all country folks are given to gossip. In that way, information may have got abroad in very undesirable quarters.
Yes, but I confess there seems something a little unsatisfactory in the burglar theory. Who is signaling to whom? I cannot see my way to accepting such an explanation. What put the plate into your head in connection with these flint signs, or whatever one may call them?
It was the figure of the bowl, said Vaughan. I happen to possess a very large and very valuable Charles II punch bowl. The chasing is really exquisite, and the thing is worth a lot of money. The sign I described to you was exactly the same shape as my punch bowl.
A queer coincidence, certainly. But the other figures or devices, you have nothing shaped like a pyramid.
Ah, you will think that is queerer. As it happens, this punch bowl of mine, together with a set of rare old ladles, is kept in a mahogany chest of a pyramidal shape. The four sides slope upwards, the narrow towards the top.
I confess all this interests me a good deal, said Dyson. Let us go on, then. What about the other figures? How about the army, as we may call the first sign, and the crescent, or half-moon?
Ah, there is no reference that I can make out of these two. Still, you see I have some excuse for curiosity at all events. I should be very vexed to lose any of the old plate. Nearly all the pieces have been in the family for generations, and I cannot get it out of my head that some scoundrel means to rob me, and are communicating with one another every night.
Frankly, said Dyson, I can make nothing of it. I am as much in the dark as yourself. Your theory certainly seems the only possible explanation, and yet the difficulties are immense.
He leaned back in his chair, and the two men faced each other, frowning and perplexed by so bizarre a problem.
By the way,
said Dyson, after a long pause,
what is your geological formation down there?
Mr. Vaughan looked up, a good deal surprised by the question. Old red sandstone and limestone, I believe, he said. We are just beyond the coal measures, you know.
But surely there are no flints either in the sandstone or the limestone.
No, I never see any flints in the fields. I confess that did strike me as a little curious.
I should think so. It is very important. By the way, what size were the flints used in making these devices?
I happen to have brought one with me. I took it this morning.
From the half-moon?
Exactly. Here it is. He handed over a small flint, tapering to a point and about 3 inches in length. Dyson's face blazed up with excitement as he took the thing from Vaughan.
Certainly, he said after a moment's pause. You have some curious neighbors in your country. I hardly think they can harbor any designs on your punch bowl. Do you know, this is a flint arrowhead of vast antiquity, and not only that, but an arrowhead of a unique kind. I have seen specimens from all parts of the world, but there are features about this thing that are quite peculiar.
He laid down his pipe and took out a book from a drawer.
We shall just have time to catch the 5:45 to Castletown, he said.